Think about the last time you felt a slight draft in your living room. Maybe it was a chilly Tuesday evening and you noticed a tiny current of cool air snaking its way under the front door or slipping through a microscopic gap in the window frame. You probably did what any of us would do. You stood up, adjusted the thermostat by 2 degrees, grabbed a fuzzy polyester throw blanket from the couch, and maybe put on a thicker pair of socks. It was a minor inconvenience, a momentary dip in your personal climate that was solved with a flick of a finger and a trip to the linen closet. We treat comfort as a baseline, a fundamental right of existing in the modern world, but that tiny draft you felt is actually a ghost. It is a very faint, very polite reminder of a world that tried to kill every single one of your ancestors for 5,000 generations straight. That little shiver you felt is the only thing linking you to a group of people who didn't have thermostats, didn't have polyester, and certainly didn't have the luxury of viewing a draft as an inconvenience. To them, a draft wasn't a nuisance. It was a biological countdown. If you've ever wondered why you have such a deep, visceral urge to curl up under a heavy blanket when it rains, or why a crackling fire feels more right than a humming radiator, it's because your body remembers a time when the world was a jagged sheet of ice and your survival depended on some of the most counterintuitive, brilliant engineering the human race has ever produced. We like to think of ancient humans as primitive, shivering in the back of damp caves, but the reality is much more impressive. They weren't just survivors, they were the original master architects of the extreme. But how do you actually keep a family of 8 warm when the air outside is literally cold enough to shatter stone? The answer begins not with fire, but with the very dirt beneath your feet. If you walk outside right now and dig a hole about 6 feet deep, you'll notice something strange. No matter how hot or cold the air is, the temperature down there stays remarkably consistent. It's a concept called thermal inertia. While the air temperature might swing 50 degrees in a single day, the Earth acts like a giant battery, soaking up heat and releasing it so slowly that the deep soil remains a steady 55 degrees year-round. Your ancestors figured this out long before they had a word for geothermal. At a site called Kostroma in modern-day Russia, researchers have uncovered what look like simple circular depressions in the earth. To a casual observer, they look like natural pits. But if you look closer, as archaeologists did during excavations in the late 20th century, you see the tool marks. These pits were deliberately excavated to specific depths, usually between 6 and 8 feet. By moving their living space into the ground, these early humans effectively moved into a preheated room. Even without a fire, a pit house in the middle of a Siberian winter would be 30 degrees warmer than the surface. It's the same reason a basement feels cool in the summer and warm in the winter. They were using the planet itself as insulation. This wasn't a desperate move by people who couldn't build houses. It was a deliberate choice by people who understood physics better than we give them credit for. They weren't fighting the cold, they were sidestepping it. But what do you do when the ground is frozen so hard that digging a pit is like trying to hollow out a diamond? That's when the engineering moves from the ground to the sky, and it involves a material that is probably sitting in a museum near you right now, the woolly mammoth. In places like Mazirich in Ukraine, researchers found something that completely upended our understanding of Paleolithic life. They found houses, but not made of wood or stone. They were made of bone. Imagine a structure where the foundation is made of 20 mammoth skulls, each weighing over 200 pounds, jawbones interlocking like a jigsaw puzzle to create a circular base. Above that, curved mammoth tusks were lashed together to form a soaring ribbed dome. It looks like the carcass of a giant ship turned upside down. The sheer weight of these structures provided the stability needed to withstand the screaming winds of the mammoth steppe, which could easily reach hurricane force. But a bone frame is just a skeleton. To make it a home, they had to solve the problem of the envelope. In modern construction, we use house wrap and vapor barriers to keep the wind out. Your ancestors used layers of mammoth hide, often 3 or 4 thick, stitched together with sinew. They would drape these hides over the bone frame, and then, this is the genius part, they would pack the gaps with a mixture of moss, dried grass, and even mammoth dung. This created a composite wall that was windproof, waterproof, and incredibly efficient at trapping heat. Experimental reconstructions of these mammoth bone houses have shown that a single small fire in the center could raise the internal temperature to a balmy 65 degrees while it was 40 below zero outside. It's architecture born of necessity, using the only building material available on a treeless plain. But once you have the house, how do you actually hold it all together when you don't have nails or screws? You reinvent chemistry. One of the most mind-blowing things about our Ice Age ancestors is that they were actually the world's first industrial chemists. If you've ever used superglue to fix a broken mug, you're using a descendant of a technology perfected 30,000 years ago. Archaeologists working at sites across Europe have found stone tools that still have traces of a black sticky substance on their hilts. For a long time, people thought it was just resin or tar that had naturally accumulated, but a 2017 study led by Paul Kozowik at Leiden University proved otherwise. This substance was birch bark tar, and you cannot make it by accident. To get tar out of birch bark, you have to heat the bark to about 400 degrees Celsius in a strictly anaerobic environment. That means no oxygen. If any air gets in, the bark just burns. These primitive humans were performing dry distillation. They would bury birch bark in pits, cover it with a specific layer of earth to seal out the air, and then build a carefully regulated fire on top. They had to maintain a specific temperature for hours to get the tar to bleed out of the bark. The result was a high-strength, waterproof adhesive that they used to haft their tools, bonding stone blades to bone handles with a grip that is arguably stronger than some modern epoxies. They used this same tar to seal the seams of their bone and hide houses, creating an airtight seal that no draft could penetrate. They were literally engineering their environment at a molecular level using nothing but fire and dirt. But if you're trapped inside that airtight, bone-framed masterpiece for a 6-month winter, how do you keep your own body's engine running? This is where the biology gets truly strange. You probably think of a healthy diet as having lots of lean protein and fresh vegetables. If you tried that during the Ice Age, you would be dead within a month. There is a medical condition known as rabbit starvation or protein poisoning. If you eat nothing but lean meat, like the meat from a rabbit or a deer, your liver eventually fails because it can't process that much protein without enough fat or carbohydrates to balance it out. John Speth, an anthropologist at the University of Michigan, has spent decades studying this protein ceiling. Our ancestors knew this instinctively. They didn't hunt for meat. They hunted for fat. This is why the woolly mammoth was the ultimate prize. It wasn't just about the bones or the hide. It was about the 4-inch thick layer of blubber beneath the skin. Fat is the most calorie-dense substance in nature, and in a world where you are constantly losing heat to the environment, calories are your only currency. Isotopic analysis of human remains from the Gravettian period shows that these people had a diet that was nearly 80% fat and protein. Their bodies actually adapted to this. They likely had higher levels of brown adipose tissue, or brown fat. Unlike the white fat most of us carry around, brown fat is packed with mitochondria, and its sole purpose is to burn calories to generate heat directly. Your ancestors were biological furnaces. They were eating the equivalent of 20 sticks of butter a day and burning it all off just to keep their internal temperature at 98.6. It makes your morning oatmeal look a little underwhelming, doesn't it? But how do you go out and hunt a 4-ton elephant in the middle of a blizzard without your skin freezing solid? You invent the needle. This sounds like a small thing, but many anthropologists argue that the invention of the eyed needle was more important to human survival than the invention of the wheel. Before the needle, humans wore draped clothing, basically just animal skins tied around the waist or shoulders. It's better than nothing, but it's terrible for heat retention because it has huge gaps where warm air escapes. At the Denisova cave in Russia, researchers found an eyed needle made of bird bone that is 50,000 years old. This allowed humans to create tailored clothing. By cutting hides into specific shapes and sewing them together, they could create a micro-environment that traveled with them. They invented the layering system long before companies like Patagonia or the North Face were a glint in the market's eye. They would wear a soft, thin layer of fur against the skin, fur side in, to trap a layer of warm air. Over that, they would wear a thicker, tougher hide, fur side out, to shed wind and moisture. They even figured out that certain furs have different properties. They used wolverine fur for the ruffs of their hoods because wolverine hair is unique. It doesn't collect frost from your breath. If you used rabbit or wolf fur around your face, your breath would freeze into ice crystals that would eventually give you frostbite. Wolverine fur stays clear. This is high-level material science. They were creating wearable technology that allowed a tropical primate, which is what humans are, to walk through a landscape that would kill a polar bear. But what happens to a person's mind when they are confined to a bone hut in the dark for months on end? This is the part of the story that often gets skipped because it doesn't leave as many fossils, but it's perhaps the most important survival method of all. During the Ice Age winter, the sun might only appear for a few hours a day, or not at all if you were far enough north. The psychological toll of that kind of isolation and darkness is massive. Modern humans get seasonal affective disorder after a few cloudy weeks. Imagine a 6-month night. To survive this, our ancestors turned the long winter into the world's first university. This is when the art happened. If you look at the cave paintings of Lascaux or Altamira, or the incredibly detailed Venus figurines found at sites like Dolny Viestenice, you're looking at the products of winter boredom. But it wasn't just art for art's sake. It was a cognitive survival strategy. By creating complex stories, myths, and rituals, they kept their brains active and their social bonds tight. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner has noted that in cultures without electricity, the things people talk about change entirely once the sun goes down. Daytime talk is about logistics, who's hunting what, where the water is, who's annoyed at whom, but nighttime talk, the kind of talk that happens around a hearth in a bone house, is about the abstract. It's about the ancestors, the stars, and the why of existence. This is where the human imagination was forged. The cold didn't just force us to be better engineers, it forced us to be better storytellers. It turned us from animals that react to the world into creatures that interpret the world. The winter was a pressure cooker for the human soul. It's the reason why to this day we feel a strange sense of peace when we're sitting around a campfire telling stories. Our brains are hardwired to see the dark not as a threat, but as a time for connection. But how did this intense period of evolution change the way we interact with each other in the long run? The survival methods of the Ice Age created a selection event for cooperation. In a warm climate, if you get into a fight with your tribe, you can just wander off and find your own food. In the Ice Age, if you were cast out, you were dead by morning. This forced a level of social cohesion that we still carry in our DNA. We are the descendants of the people who learned how to get along in a space no bigger than your bedroom for weeks at a time. We learned how to share resources, how to care for the elderly. Archaeological evidence shows many individuals who lived for years with healed broken bones or lost teeth, meaning someone was feeding them and keeping them warm, and how to plan for a future that was months away. We became planners. We learned how to store food in permafrost freezers, digging pits into the frozen ground to keep mammoth meat fresh for a year. We learned how to track the stars to know exactly when the spring would arrive. We basically turned the entire planet into a laboratory for human ingenuity. And then, about 12,000 years ago, the ice began to retreat. The mammoth bone houses were abandoned. The birch tar factories were forgotten. The eyed needles were replaced by metal ones. We moved out of the pits and into the light. We think of this as the beginning of civilization, the Neolithic Revolution. But the truth is that everything we think of as civilized, engineering, chemistry, tailoring, social welfare, and storytelling was already perfected in the dark during the coldest nights the world has ever known. We didn't learn those things because we were comfortable. We learned them because we were terrified of the draft under the door. So the next time you feel that little chill in your house and you reach for the thermostat, take a second to look at your hand. Look at the way your thumb can grip a dial, the same way a Gravettian hunter gripped a bone needle. Feel the warmth of your house and realize that it isn't just a building. It's the end result of 30,000 years of refusing to freeze. You are part of a lineage of engineers who looked at a 500-mile-wide sheet of ice and decided that wasn't going to be the end of the story. You don't have to worry about rabbit starvation or distilling birch bark in your backyard, but the only reason you're here to enjoy your climate-controlled life is because your ancestors were the most brilliant, stubborn, and innovative survivors to ever walk the earth. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they used it to build the version of humanity that you're currently using to watch this. It's a pretty good deal, honestly. You get the comfort, and they did the hard work of figuring out how to make a house out of a dead elephant. What's wild is that many of the primitive techniques they used are still the gold standard for survival today. If you ask a modern survival expert or a military special forces operator how to survive a night in the Arctic, they won't tell you to build a skyscraper. They'll tell you to dig a hole. They'll tell you to use layers. They'll tell you to find fat. We spent thousands of years and billions of dollars developing modern technology, only to realize that the guys in the Mammoth bone houses had it right the first time. There's something deeply humbling about that. It suggests that we aren't actually smarter than our ancestors. We just have better stuff. If you dropped a modern engineer into the year 25,000 BCE, they'd probably spend the first week trying to figure out how to make fire. If you brought a Paleolithic hunter into the present, they'd probably have the thermal efficiency of your house figured out in about 20 minutes. And then they'd ask why you're wasting so much space. We live in a world they wouldn't recognize, but we have brains they created. We have the same capacity for innovation, the same drive to fix what's broken, and the same need to tell stories in the dark. The Ice Age ended, but the Ice Age mind is still very much in charge. It's the part of you that looks at a problem and says, I can build my way out of this. It's easy to feel disconnected from the past when everything is so easy. We order food from an app instead of tracking a mammoth for 3 days. We buy a jacket from a store instead of sewing it from 5 different types of fur. But that connection is still there, buried just beneath the surface of your modern life. It shows up in the way we design our cities, the way we protect our families, and even the way we dream. We are a species that was forged in the cold, and that cold is what gave us our edge. Without the Ice Age, we might still be sitting in trees in Africa, perfectly content and perfectly stagnant. The ice was the catalyst. It was the great teacher that told us to either get smart or go extinct. And looking at where we are now, I think it's safe to say we chose the right option. We didn't just survive, we conquered the climate itself. We turned the entire world into a place where we can feel that little draft and not have to worry that it's the last thing we'll ever feel. That's a miracle of engineering that took 30 millennia to finish. Think about that tonight when you're lying in bed, tucked under your sheets, listening to the wind rattle your window. That sound used to be the most terrifying thing in the world. Now it's just background noise for your sleep. You've won the ultimate war against the elements. You are warm, you are safe, and you are the legacy of a group of people who looked at a glacier and didn't blink. The thermostat on your wall isn't just a tool, it's a victory trophy. It's a testament to every bone house, every birch tar bond, and every needle-sewn hide that kept the flame of humanity alive when the whole world was trying to put it out. You're not just living in the modern world, you're living in the warm, cozy aftermath of the greatest survival story ever told. And honestly, considering that your ancestors had to literally stitch their houses together out of dead mammoths just to stay alive, your Monday morning doesn't actually seem that bad anymore, does it? You've got the heat, you've got the food, and you've got the stories. All you have to do is remember where they came from. The next time you see a picture of a woolly mammoth, don't just see an extinct animal. See the bricks and mortar of your own history. See the reason you're here. And then maybe check that draft under your door one more time, just out of respect for the people who would have given anything for a door that actually closed. It's a strange thought, but in a way, we're all still living in those bone houses. Our walls are thinner, our fires are electric, and our mammoths are long gone. But the fundamental mission hasn't changed. We're still just trying to keep the dark at bay and the warmth inside. We're still just trying to make it to the next spring. And as long as we keep that Ice Age ingenuity alive, as long as we keep asking, how can I make this better? We're going to be just fine. The world might get cold again, the ice might come back, and the draft might get a little stronger. But we know what to do. We've been through it before. We've got the needles, we've got the chemistry, and we've got each other. That's more than enough to beat any winter the universe can throw at us. If you've made it this far, it means you've got that same spark of curiosity that kept our ancestors awake in those bone huts, wondering what was over the next ridge. It's that drive to understand how the world works and how we fit into it. If you want to keep exploring these weird corners of human history and the science of how we became us, then you might want to stick around. There are a lot more stories buried in the permafrost, and I'm planning on digging up every single one of them. What's the weirdest thing you've ever done to stay warm when the power went out? Let me know in the comments, because I'm betting some of you have accidentally used Ice Age engineering without even realizing it. Subscribe if you want to join the tribe, and we'll keep the fire going together. Because at the end of the day, you aren't just a person living in a house. You are the apex predator of a planet that tried its best to freeze you out and failed. You are currently sitting in a climate-controlled room, probably drinking a beverage that is the exact temperature you want it to be, while the descendants of the things that used to hunt your ancestors are mostly in zoos. You didn't just survive the Ice Age, you turned it into your own personal luxury suite. You're the winner of a 30,000-year game of hide-and-seek with death, and the fact that you're bored enough to watch a video about it is the ultimate proof that you've won.